Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and this is Human Potential at Work. I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and I hope everybody's doing great, staying safe, and ready for a really dynamic, fun conversation. Today, my guest is James Sinclair, and we actually were having a fun time getting on air. We were having such a fun time that the producer Doug's like, "No, seriously, get on air." So we are now coming on air. But James Sinclair is the CEO of EnterpriseAlumni. And James reached out to me on social media and said, "Debra, we really should, we should talk. And actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to be on your show because I think that this is a conversation and a topic that I don't hear that people are talking about." And I was really surprised because it's such a duh, and I cannot believe that we aren't having these conversations. So James is joining us from across the pond, and let me, James, give the microphone to you, and maybe you can tell the audience where you're joining from, who you are, and a little bit about what you're doing too.
I love that. Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely delighted to be here. I have some good news, which is I'm not quite across that pond. I'm in Los Angeles currently. So the accent
I'm
is...
so sorry.
The accent, no,
You're
please
in the
don't.
US right now?
Don't be so...
Sorry.
You know, I always tell people the accent keeps me employed and married. So I keep my accent level as high as possible. And I'm as you mentioned, the chief executive of EnterpriseAlumni, and we focus on this post-employment relationship, which if I could just give the quick 10-seconder, it's companies spend so much money finding the perfect people. And then when they're there, training and developing and quality of life and all of these retention programs. And then when they leave, it's like, high five, good luck.
Right,
and so we are in the high five, good luck column that says that's not the way people should leave.
Here's a watch.
Yeah, used to be you're dead to us, treason.
Right.
Oh, you're leaving? You're a traitor to this company and never speak to us again. And now companies are they can't have that conversation because they need to be creating candidates, and they're waking up to this employee experience that when you go to your next job, the first thing someone's going to say is, "Oh, where were you before this?" And you're going to say, "I was at X. Awesome, great company, loved it, but I'm excited for this opportunity." Or they're going to say, "Oh, I escaped." And you have a choice.
Right. And and what's so interesting about that is that I really have not thought about it from that perspective, but I think about it. I immediately thought of one of my friends. I'm not going to say who it is, but one gigantic brand and went to another gigantic brand, and she has some tales to tell about the other brand. And it's just such a good point, because don't think we're not listening and we're not paying attention. But this also would tie into people that, there's legends of a word called retire.
Right.
I know both of my parents now transitioned over to the other side, but both of my parents are passed, but they worked for AT&T their whole life. And so I'll say I'm an AT&T brat instead of a Navy brat, but even though my father was in the Navy too, but they took such pride in that they were retired from AT&T. I remember my mom would get so mad at me that I wouldn't use AT&T as my provider. I used stupid Verizon, but I use Verizon just because the quality, they have a little bit better, coverage where I am. But my parents were so loyal to AT&T. The rest of their lives, they were so proud to have worked for that company, and I just hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I just think your work is fascinating. So let me.
You nailed it, which is, our parents, and I think I'm quoting someone else without credit, so I apologize, but someone said basically, or I heard recently, your parents had one job for life, you'll have 4 jobs in your lifetime, and your kid's going to have 4 jobs right now. And I think that if you think about that, what it means is this population that's out there of ex-employees, retirees, whatever it might be, fired, left voluntarily, whatever, that population is so large that to not engage and use them like your parents, who would take lesser service because they are so loyal to the brand. And the Starbucks CHRO says it perfectly, which is every touch point you have with any human ever has to be the same way you would treat your best customer, period.
but I never, ever thought, I thought about it from the perspective of, my parents and retire, but I never thought about it from this perspective. And it is fascinating because you're right. You're right. I mean, those people that actually worked for your company, and we know what's under the sheets.
Yeah.
And of course, from whatever perspective we had, right? Because just because, and I'll throw out some names of companies I worked for. I used to work for Crestar Bank, which then became SunTrust, which now is Truist. I worked for Bank Boston, which I worked for Barnett Bank. I was in the banking industry, obviously. And you're right. What I would say, based on my experience about the brand before me, the people listen. It's
Yeah.
just, why have we not remembered this segment?
And it's not like a weird bias either. It's not like a weird, like, subconscious. No, people ask, where did you work before? And
Yeah.
if they actually ask the question, it's not like they kind of creep around it. And so even if you were to forget all the other benefits, let's think about your parents. If AT&T said to your parents, hey, because you're a retiree, we're going to give you this coupon code. Anyone you give it to is going to get 15% off their AT&T plan. Your parents would have been out there like,
Yes.
like they're selling Tupperware in one of those, pyramid schemes all day,
Right.
telling everyone around it. And so that's sales. They might recruit, their dream is not their dream, but, they would be thrilled to recruit you and tell you, hey, you've got to work at AT&T. They're amazing. So you have sales, you have recruitment, you have advocacy. And this is not kind of ish. This is no brainer, period.
I know. And they did that. They did that. They were so, especially my mom. My mom was so proud to work for AT&T, and she was so proud of this point. Now, we're going to definitely tell her age. She's passed over, but she never missed a day of work. And I'm sure there were days when she should have missed it because in the middle of a pandemic,
Yeah.
maybe you shouldn't go to work sick. But she took such pride in this. And so I was so fascinated with your work. I was so fascinated and so glad you reached out to me too, because it is such a huge opportunity, but
Monster.
nobody's talking about, I've never met anybody that does this. How did you get into it? How did you think
Oh,
about this?
I know is an acceptable answer of like, I feel like everyone gets into a business by like walking down the street, falling in a pothole and turning left.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
generally how life takes unexpected turns. I was always in rapid innovation, fast innovation for large enterprises. I moved into the HR line of business. And we saw just a big white space around this area that it wasn't like I was looking for a white space, but we just saw there was a white space and there was a chance that very large companies are going to need best of breed vendors.
Mhm.
Find me a vendor that solves this one thing and does it perfectly, as opposed to this kind of monolithic suite they were coming out of. So as we think about the cloud transition, and I don't want to nosedive into, geeking out, but big customers are moving from like having their own stuff in the basement to the cloud.
Right.
Salesforce, whatever it might be. And we saw this massive opportunity that with that, smaller companies that didn't have to be, tier one companies who were best of breed, did what they said on the tin and did it really well, could actually not only compete, but flourish. And so, we've been in business about 3.5 years, and I'm with you. Anytime we have to kind of explain it, when we meet someone new, they're like, oh, yeah,
I know you're like,
yeah,
what?
yeah.
Right. Yeah, because I was telling you that people pitch me to be on the show sometimes. I was telling you about one that I just got pitched about exorcism, and I'm like, I don't think that I don't think that's going to speak to my audience, but it's actually, interestingly enough, ties to, a very serious, sad subject, suicide. And so now that I am interested in talking about. So, but when you told me, it was such a duh, but, and also, and so then I get into it and I start thinking about all the possibilities. Because once again, so I'm working for one of these really big companies, and it isn't just about big companies, but let's just do it that for a second. And um and so people know that the best employees, the most talented employees, including employees with disabilities, that and I'm going to just name one person. There's this gentleman named Steve Tyler who actually is across the pond, and he's living in the UK, and he's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. He happens to be blind, and he's just brilliant. And so he worked for one RNIB, and then he left, and then he started work for Leonard Cheshire. And so he's sought after. Everybody that knows him would love to have him work for him. It
Right.
worked for them. And so it's interesting because there are things that we will learn. So, okay, so I'm working for the company. So, well, so tell me, so you worked for that other company. Did they really care about accessibility? Did they really care about inclusion? Do you think that they cared about diversity and inclusion? Or is it just they blah, blah, blah? Or if, for example, if you're looking at it from my lens or any other lens, do you really think that they care about society? Think of it's just mind boggling because
Yeah.
probably I would think now that you've introduced me to this, I would think that must be your most important audiences. They can make or break you in ways that
So
you
powerful.
never. I know. So how come we've any? Do you have any idea of why we have this is invisible? I mean, thank you for
So,
you
yeah.
making it, but why are
Yeah,
we not
true.
like
Why
that?
haven't you heard about it before? I would always say that our biggest competition has never heard of us or never heard of it.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so we are creating a new market. Now, you might have heard of it around Accenture or McKinsey, kind of this when you leave, you have a bond, and that's important. But the new conversation around alumni is more than that. It's bigger. It's learning, development. You talk about your friend in the UK who leaves a company, goes somewhere else. He's not a recruiting asset. He's not coming back today. He just left to go somewhere else. But maybe his circle of friends, maybe his circle of influence, maybe something. The reality is you have an asset you've invested so much in. There's nothing else that you would invest that much in that you would let walk off your balance sheet. I'm not looking to turn this into a dollars and cents conversation, but it is. So even if
It
you don't
is.
care about your people, even if actually it's just a hashtag and you don't follow through on it, let's just assume that's the case. It's still important because number one is you've got an asset that you've invested money into. Don't throw it away. So whether or not you do follow through on your hashtags, it doesn't matter. This is a no-brainer. I mean, I have a great example about right now. One of our customers is actively reaching out to their retirees, a group who's often been thought about as, okay, well, they're not coming back to work for us. They're not really selling on our behalf. They're not great advocates, and they complain too much. And they're too vocal. And every time they do speak, they say things like, oh, this company was built on my shoulders, which it was. So
Right, right.
I mean, to be fair, actually was, but never mind. So let's assume, and I know I'm giving the very negative, and I hope you're okay with me taking a very
I
outlier,
am.
aggressive example of that.
No, I think it's a really powerful conversation.
So amazing. And so if
So
anyone is listening,
run.
no offense to anybody. I'm just framing a conversation. This is just opinion. But I have a customer right now who is reaching out to those retirees who've retired in the past 4 years or took an early retirement program in the past 8 years where they kind of pushed them out, gave them some cash and wished them luck. And basically saying, would you come back to do project-based work at some point in the next period? We have no idea what the period is because we have no idea what the F is happening right now in the world. But we think we might need you. Would you come back? If so, what's your mobility? What's your time? How many hours? So they're going and they're doing this massive survey to understand this talent pool because the reality is they need three things. One is they're going to need people boots on the ground quickly. We don't have 3 weeks to train you on how the hell to log into our weird system where you have to press, Control Alt 3 7 times, call the exorcist and pray to log into the system. They need someone who knows about that. The second, and probably the most critical, was we need people in our organization who have both been through and recovered from a crisis. And our current senior leadership in aggregate has not. They haven't been through the cycle of that. So we don't need retirees because we need them to enter Excel spreadsheets, but maybe we do. We need their leadership, their thought process, their understanding. How the hell did we do this last time? Because I wasn't with the company, or if I was a manager at that time. I wasn't a global VP. And so, you start seeing this conversation around inclusion be a broader conversation that, look, companies are selfish. They called the retirees because they realized they need them. But once they did that, it kind of woke up that sleeping giant of, oh, 1 second, they love us. They're
Right,
advocates for
right.
us. They're activists for us. How have we treated them like, oh, for God's sake, Frank and his frigging change of address, just God's sake, you know what I mean? And that's how it's often looked at, as a very procedural, like, for God's sake, Frank, stop annoying us, as opposed to,
Right. And
yeah, sorry.
instead, I remember when I was working at the last bank that I worked for, Crestar. And I remember there was a woman that had been there for many, many years. And and something happened with one of our customers, and it was a big deal. And we were all freaked out and everything. And she's like, oh, well, 19 years ago, we did this. And we're like, oh, wow. So, and it saved us so much time because she remembered that. And it's fascinating because I think, the lens of some of my friends that have retired, I think about my parents and stuff. I think about my grandparents. They had so much pride in the companies they worked for. Now, did the companies treat them like they cared or no? But I mean, my mom and my dad, they were so loyal to AT&T.
Right.
So,
And I think loyalty is not difficult to build. Look, this is a new generation that defines loyalty differently. Not unlike my parents or grandparents who defined loyalty as thank you for giving me this job and paying me, which was the symbol of loyalty is I'm still employed. Well, that's it. That's the end of the sentence. I'm still employed and my paycheck cleared. The new symbol of loyalty is are you aligning to what I care about, to what I'm trying to do in the world? And it's not across the board. Look, there are some jobs I just need someone to dig a ditch.
Right.
And I don't really care about much else, just dig the ditch and that's it. So I know that I'm generalizing, but you're exactly right. It's when companies wake up and see it. The reality is for a lot of organizations, why change, what is the net benefit of changing a process for the better if it's going to be a long-term process? So these things have to start at the top because someone who is in that middle tier doesn't have the performance bonus that says, hey, focus on something that over the next 3 to 5 years is going to pay us back exponentially, because he or she may be thinking, well, I might not be here in 3 or 5 years to see the benefits. So if this isn't going to impact my performance, essentially, if you can't make the person you're selling to a hero, well, why would they buy? And what you're now seeing is organizations, actually people having a vested interest and saying, you know what, it doesn't matter whether I'm going to be here or not. I want to change. But no one ever got fired for doing it the old way. No one ever got, performance penalized for doing it the old way. This is a new way that says, what if? And it's scary. What if you were human? Cue theme music.
Right. And what's so fascinating is so my husband retired from Capital One. And so that's a big plug for Capital One. I happen to use Capital One's credit. We have multiple credit cards from Capital One. We have other services. And he is very proud to have retired. Now, something to remember is that many of these global corporations, they have 5 generations working for them.
Retiree to intern, right?
Yeah.
And they need something different. All of them need something different as well, which I think I just interrupted exactly what you were going to say. I'm so sorry.
I'm that way too.
I apologize because I like, you throw me in a direction. I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to say about that. And I know that's my personality, but I mean, the 5 generations, you're one of the first people who said that back to me, which is why I got excited, which is, and you cannot give everyone the same experience. I often tell customers the reason you need relevance and context is because if you don't, it's like dragging everyone to a Celine Dion concert. Some people are going to be thrilled. Some people are going to be like, but fine. Some people are going to be like, I don't understand why I'm here. And some people are going to be pissed. Why the hell am I sitting here? And they're going to walk out angry. You've got to be relevant. You've got to be contextual. But imagine if your husband left Capital One and his credit card was branded, a special brand that said Capital One Alumni. That was it.
I know.
Imagine how proud, and I mean, we have hotel brands and airline brands that do that when you leave, if you spent more than a few years at the firm, they'll give you a special card. I can't remember the last time I went to a hotel and actually showed my card, but just having it in the wallet would make you feel so proud, because the only way you could get that credit card is by working at the company for more than X years. So there's these tiny things that cost nothing that literally would have this army of advocates just out there, and he would be a card-carrying alumni member with a card that no one else is really going to see or recognize except for him, and it's going to make him smile. And that's what's important.
And the rest of the employees that see it. And also, it's interesting. I love the point that you made about, maybe I'm not retiring from the company, but I'm leaving the company. So an example of me, I used to work for Crestar, which once again is SunTrust and about to be Truist, but still, when I say that and people are like, oh, really? So tell me, how are they doing with accessibility? How are they doing with disability inclusion? You think they really care about it? It's fascinating, not to mention many of us, of all ages are on social media. And we're also talking about, and immediately when you say you work there, once again, I think of my friend that I'm not going to mention the company. She had a terrible experience with the other brand. So when she went into that competitor, people are starting saying, so how is it really to work for them? We see them in the news all the time and blah, blah, blah. And her opinion of her experience of working for them, it's people are going to really listen to it, because whether or not it represents the whole company and who they really are, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter.
Her experience.
Right. It doesn't matter. And also,
my shitty experience at Starbucks is not a reflection of the global brand. It's a reflection of the fact that, Sheila got out of bed on the wrong side this morning and is having a shitty day. And, so when I choose, to fire up a tweet storm about it, it's actually a little bit unfair because we're all allowed off days. But I'm with you. It's just, and when you talk about accessibility, you see a lot of kind of scare accessibility. We need compliance because otherwise you're going to get sued. You're going to get sued and you're going to get this. And if I may, I'd love to tell you how I got into accessibility and became kind of this fierce advocate, almost aggressively annoyed about the process. If that's something I can take a left.
Absolutely, because I get so annoyed that people don't take it seriously. So go for it.
So openly, I was familiar with JAWS and the screen readers, but familiar through arm's length, never seen it, never used it, didn't know if you install it, if you look at it, if it comes in through the internet, the air, literally no idea. Just knew that there was stuff that existed. I have a friend of mine who's part of that global day that exists, but we had two instances. The first is we had a lady email us, and so one of the things we believe is, even though the company pays us, so if Capital One was our customer, Capital One might pay us, our end users and who we serve, our real customer, is the end user, the alumni, the people who have left. And we believe if we serve that community amazingly, they in turn will serve Capital One. So we look at the company not being our customer, because that's a very, it's a very one-sided view of like, what's in it for us? But you can't look at it like that. You have to say, how can I deliver value to the end users, to the alumni? And if you deliver them value, perhaps they'll deliver value back. And we had an amazing email from a lady who said, I just have to tell you, and this is years ago, and I'm okay talking about it, that I'm having an awful experience on your website, and I'm blind. Actually, I think she said she's hard of seeing, and at the time I was obviously getting all support emails early in our days, very early, so everything funneled into me, replied within 15 seconds, talk to me about this, explain to me what am I missing, because if one person says it means 1,000 people are thinking it, and 10,000 are experiencing it. So you can never look at one person speaking up as an outlier. You have to take everything seriously. Whether you act on it is different. You have to at least take the purpose or the conversation seriously and listen, and then decide what you're going to do about it. And so I got on, I think I was on a call with her 6 minutes after she had sent the email, because I'd replied back, she'd replied back, I was on a call with her, and she took me through the process, and she said, look, let me talk to you about why. And we had this amazing conversation. I felt awful because I didn't realize. And when we started looking at the data, she showed us how we could work out what percentage of people have these screen readers installed and the ARIA tags, all these things. We realized, and now I can tell you, about 3% of our global population uses our accessibility widget in some manner. Now, that can be as little as, and I tell customers this, as little as the fact that when I look at my mum's iPhone, it's size 900 font. She has basically 4 words in the text message. And I'm like, what? That's accessibility. People don't think about it. That is just because, you don't have to go all the way to the extremes. And so that started our journey. And what we had in our corner was a fierce advocate for us, an end customer who was going to guide us in the right direction, because you build for the people you are. When you talk about diversity or you talk about inclusion, you build the product based on the people around you. And if you don't have interaction with any one of that, then it's just compliance. It's exactly the same about inclusion for other minorities or other underrepresented communities, whatever it might be. This is not just accessibility. This is gender, this is age, this is race, this is ethnicity, this is all of those things. And I'm not suggesting they're all bundled together and they have, what I am suggesting though, is they all come under a bigger conversation of why are you doing it? Are you a great company that means it? Diversity means you're all in on actually doing it, which means it's not compliance. It means an all-in cultural, everybody in the company understands why it's important. So over the past 3-4 years, we've been driving down and pushing for this AA accessibility, but the ending point of that, 3% of our population, the emails we get from the people that do use this software, that do use our accessibility component or see how hard we're trying, the positive emails they send to our customers is so overwhelming, and it's such a good use case of solve one thing for one person amazingly, and they will be your advocate for life. And so accessibility has also taught us that, around how we deal with underrepresented communities and how we make sure there's a voice out there and how we need to have better lines of communication to our end users. So long story short, it's okay to come from a place of ignorance, naivety, whatever it is, not knowing. I think it's all about realizing, imagine if your mother or your kid or your brother or your sister had this problem, and how pissed you'd be that when they go to a website, they can't log in. They can't enjoy it because you don't believe it's necessary.
Correct. It's too much trouble. And keep it updated. Yeah, I agree. And as you're dealing with the alumni, once again, we're in these beautiful human bodies. And sometimes as we age, sometimes we're living our lives, we acquire disabilities. When you look at the community of people with disabilities, 20% of that population are born with disabilities, like my daughter. My daughter was born with the X chromosome. She has Down syndrome. It's just really who she is. It's just part of her DNA. But my husband has acquired a disability as he's lived his life. And he had a traumatic brain injury by being hit by it. He hit the car, but anyway, he ran in front of a car on accident, getting his kite going. But so a traumatic brain injury, recovered from that, and then it unfortunately has led into, as he's aged, to dementia. But the reality is, making your websites and your technology and your communications accessible to all of us benefits everybody. And I also want to throw something else at you, James. One thing that I find a lot with my work is that, for example, what I say about a corporation often is considered more valuable than what the brand says about themselves. Because of course you're going to say good things about yourself, but they're going to trust a market influencer. And many of us are market influencers now, and the brands, they don't really control or own their brand anymore. Sort of society does. And so I think that must be very important to the work that you're doing as well. Because once again, if I was considering I'm a sought after employee and I could go to a Google, a Microsoft, an Amazon, or you can insert any names you want in there. And I had somebody that I knew and I cared about their opinion saying, when I worked for Google, they were amazing and they did this and they tried it. That would mean so much more to me than what Google was saying about themselves. Or once again, you could put any name in there.
So true.
And,
so true.
But we don't even think about these things. I'm fascinated by that. And I also haven't thought about it from the other lens that you're coming from, in that if I leave, should we all assume, for example, that I left, once again, I'll go to Crestar. I left Crestar because I hated them. No, I didn't. I left Crestar at the time because I wanted to create my own company and I wanted to support the community of people with disabilities. I really liked working for Crestar. I thought they were great. Then they actually became SunTrust when I was still working with them, and I left. But it wasn't really because I was disgruntled or had any problems with them. It was because my path was forward this way. So I'm fascinated with that aspect of it and how you.
So much to unpack, Deborah. So much to unpack there. You
and just because
I feel like every time you say something, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much I want to say. I'm so sorry. You keep on seeing my eyes like roll up, thinking about because you bring up these really very valid points. The first point if it's apologies again for talking for way too long. Diversity impacts the bottom line.
Yes, it does.
And I think people forget that. That's it. That's the end of the sentence. But if you want to unpack that a little bit more, it's speed of innovation, it's diversity of opinion, it's being more human. There's a billion reasons, and the data's there. And if you want to see some data out there, use the gender gap. If you have a woman on your board or you have a female-led company, you will have more successful results. This is not causation versus correlation. I was going to tell you when you brought up the Exorcist example about exorcisms and suicides, I can show you the same chart for Nicolas Cage movies. But as Nicolas Cage movies come out, the suicide rate seems to match it. they're not quite related. You know what I mean? So this causation versus correlation is really important. But we know that female-led, female-owned, female board-represented companies will perform better. The data's there. We're done on the conversation. We just need we need more data, because for some reason companies, you give them the data and they still like, oh, we see the data, we accept it. And what now?
Right.
And I think that's the first section. I think the second section is about, when they leave, it doesn't matter what they leave or why they leave or how they leave. You can't control that. And maybe I hate my manager. Maybe I hate my company. It may be, but actually most people leave because they want to fall upstairs. They want to go into a job they're slightly unqualified for. And I don't mean that rudely. What I mean is they're going to a job perhaps, and the reason they're not getting the job in the current company is because they're not qualified for it yet. and the current company knows that, versus the job they're going into where they're going to, and again, I hate to use this general phrase of like, I'm trying to go a little bit up in my career. And maybe I'm not getting the same vertical growth internally because I'm not ready. And that's okay. So a lot of growth happens. And I think companies need to realize the fact that you left to start your own company is because of where you worked, not in spite of them. And the companies need to be really proud of that. Debra left us and she went on to do something amazing for the community and we were part of that journey. She didn't leave us for, she's the worst and she's leaving us starting her own company. No, it's because of us. And I would imagine that all of your experience has been able to tie into how you run your company, how you deal with customers, how you deal with conflict, how you deal with billing, how you deal with bullshit. It all comes from experience that you've picked up along your journey. And I think more companies are waking up that the job you have now when you leave is because of us, not in spite of us.
That is so true, but I have not ever thought about that. And I talk about Crestar / SunTrust, now Truist. I talk about him because I am the parent, and a lot of people know this, of an adult child with Down syndrome. Right? And when I was the vice president at Crestar Bank, they brought me and other managers. They came to me and said, "Would you be interested in hiring some people with disabilities?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, yes. Are you kidding?" And I actually started getting the idea of what I could do. And then my daughter goes into middle school and they start saying she can't add value to the workforce. I'm like, what? So Crestar actually introduced the idea to me. So you are right on. And that I built upon that. And I tell them that I'll run into them. They recently reconnected with me and I said, let me tell you, you're why I'm here.
You're a success story. You're a success story for that organization. As a new recruit coming to work for that company, I want to know your story. Let me show you Debra, who worked for us for X years, did this and left and is now leading the market in X. To me, that is employer branding. That should be on their LinkedIn. The story of success is this is what you'll become. And I think companies are also starting to recognize that they need to teach you the underlying skills, not the competencies. Because we know that the 2030 workforce, 80% of that workforce is in the workforce right now. There's going to be words that are created for competencies we've never even heard of. And so what we're seeing is this shift that says, actually, instead of saying I'm looking for a ditch digger, I'm looking for someone that's analytical, that's a quick learner, that works well in teams, that's an extrovert, and I will teach them how to dig the ditch. I will teach them how to do this. I will teach them the new coding language. And so this conversation of kind of hiring under the core skills means companies are changing and now saying, actually, we need to show you and teach you how to learn. Instead of saying, here's all the learning, learn everything. Well, the first course should be, hey, here's a great way to learn. And I always tell people, the greatest way to start reading a book is to read the first line. And very often companies forget to tell their new recruits, their interns, their vocational students, that what's exists. And it goes back to your conversation, though, about accessibility, is you act upon what's around you. You build a product and you build a methodology because of your interaction. It's like when people say, why do people love dolphins? Why do people love the turtle so much? Well, everyone saw the straw up its nose. And it's like, oh my God, we must save the turtles. What about the sharks? Who are just as much in threat. Well, you love what you see, you're impacted by what you see. And I think that's important for us to be open about as well, is when we were talked to about it, we were like, now we know, now we see it. And now we have a choice. Do we care? And the answer can be yes or no. And if we do care, how do we resolve it? But here's something I do want to tell you. Accessibility is difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult. It's not something you can overlay on. It costs money. And we're a young company, so it costs money. It's difficult. It's never right. It's never done. It's, we do our WCAG AA certification every 6 months, and we love it because it tells us what's wrong. And essentially we know that, and we release fast enough, and we're open. But it's, if you're a young company, to
Yes.
invest in that, and to engineers to have to upskill, and now you've got to include it in your testing programming. Someone's got to actually test it in the jaws and the thing and the doodad.
Right.
And
right.
it's really, really tough. And that was one of the biggest obstacles that I personally faced, that I want to just bring up, which is, I'm sorry, to meet to meet the minimum level of expectations of being a decent company, the minimum level. This is what I have to do, which means I have to build accessibility into my core, which means when I'm hiring people, I have to explain to them, I'm going to teach you a new skill that you've probably never heard of. I'm going to introduce you to for a front engineer, an ARIA tag that you've never even heard that word before in your life. And you need to understand that no tag, no production. And you need to, it's the same as security. And so that's what was really openly difficult for us, is that we had to treat accessibility the same way we treat security and we treat code scanning, and which is, it has to be part of our core. It can't be a band-aid, or it's going to come back and follow us. And I think that's, what I want to do is with all the high fives, I think it would be unfair not to represent it was a very difficult journey for us, but we had a community of people willing to speak. Every person that we phoned to ask for advice, how we go through, was like, I love that you're going through this. I will show you. I will give you my time. I don't need you to pay us. They would say, look, if you need me to do it for you, I'm a consultant, pay me. But I'm thrilled you're doing this, because similar to you, I have someone in my family impacted, and I love that you're joining this journey. And if I have to do a little bit of free work, and perhaps that's an unfair statement, that someone like you might have to give me an hour for free because I don't know what I'm getting out of you. You know what I mean? I don't know what you can. I don't know what I don't know. This is the true Donald Rumsfeld. I don't know what I don't know. And so that's the only thing. I apologize again for double downing on this conversation of difficulty and where you start. And the answer is, you start with an amazing community, and that's what has been built. And that's what needs to be highlighted, which is, we don't expect, the community told me, we don't expect you to get it right. We don't expect it to be perfect. We don't expect it to be even near perfect version 1. What we expect you to do is take incremental steps forward. That's it.
Yes. And to try to include us, And we focus a lot of time on in my company about all of the intersectionalities of diversity. Once again, hadn't thought about the perspective you were coming from. Now I know it, got it. That's very powerful. But, and I have, you're right. It's Doug and I have actually had shows about, should we pay for social good? And so but if somebody comes to me, especially a small business, and they're like, or a nonprofit, where do we even begin? I definitely will point them in different directions, because sometimes it's just better to help people. Now, if a big brand comes to me and it's like, hey, will you work for free? No, I will not. I will not do that for you for free. You need to take this seriously. So there's sort of
education versus work. Is that a fair statement? Like, what I was asking for when I started my journey was education. Tell me who I need to speak to. Tell me what it is. And I think there's a very famous phrase that they have around kind of all these big topics is, how do you eat an elephant? When you see something so big like accessibility, and you see the guidelines for AA compliance, and you're like, well, I guess I'm never meeting that. The way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's the biggest thing I got from the community. And I mean, I spoke to a guy at Microsoft who leads, he introduced me to a day and the things that they're doing. And he was amazing in saying, look, I actually can help you for free. And we can do work for free with you because I want to. Nothing makes me happier than someone walking in and saying, oh, help me.
Microsoft, I would say Microsoft, IBM, Atos, there's a few brands that have really stood up to say, we want to help you. When I created Tech Access, we didn't know what we were doing. And so we actually learned how to do accessibility through a lot of content that IBM and Microsoft were putting out there.
Right.
We taught ourselves from the content they did years and years ago, obviously. But it's a good point, and also I want you to include the community of people with disabilities and people that are aging into disabilities. And by the way, as you know, accessibility benefits all of the customers. Accessibility really matters to everyone. And so
we have increased, just so you know, we have increased site speed because of accessibility, because we found a way to do something better. but I just agree with you. And I think that's where people forget is the first step is recognizing or understanding the problem. Just saying, I hear you. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning of the conversation, which is, okay, I hear the problem. Now I'm going to decide, do I give a shit or not? And that's okay. Look, you may choose, I need compliance because this customer says, I can't buy your software unless you have AA certification audit. That's okay too. You know, because not everyone has, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'll give you another bad example. I had a company, a medium-sized company, come to me. This is not the way to ask for help. They came to me and they said, well, we want to sell our HR systems to the customers you're dealing with. And I said, well, is it accessible? Okay, they didn't know what I was talking about. So I explained it to them. So then the CEO came back and said, well, all right, we'll do that. We'll go ahead and we'll do that. If you teach us how to do it and do all the work for free, we'll help your community. Wrong answer, wrong way to do it. And I said, okay, well, let me tell you that you will not I will not introduce you to anyone, any of my clients, any of the community until anyway, so that's not the way to handle it. But if they'd come and said, we don't even know where to begin, so it's all in the way you present.
But even if I did ring you and say, Debra, I have to be honest, I don't know much about this topic. We have a new customer. We're a small company. They've asked for this AA thing. I did a search. Your website came up. Help! I don't need work. I don't need you to put pen to paper. I just need a bit of guidance. And I think help. And community is the answer to that. Community is the biggest thing that probably helped us through this in terms of understanding how to train our people. We didn't have much money. We made no secret of it.
You're
and
a
so
small business.
Yeah,
small businesses are just starting out. And I'll tell you that we helped, and I won't say who it is, but we helped a really tiny business that was doing something that we felt was very important to people with disabilities. And unfortunately, in the pandemic, they're in big trouble, like so many small businesses. And so they owed us money, and they were like, we're sorry. So they paid us, we said, just pay us just pay us payments. So they paid us the first payment. And then I was thinking about it, and I was thinking how hard it is for them. And I wrote the CEO and I said, listen, I love what you're doing. We're thriving in this. Thank goodness. You don't owe us any money anymore. I'm just going to wipe that out. And they were like, really? But small business owners, we got to help each other because it's tough. It's tough out here. Yeah. But all right, speaking of small business owners, I know that we're almost out of time. And so I really love the work you're doing. And I'm really looking forward to having another conversation about us collaborating. But for the audience, tell the audience how to find you. I want you to tell them your website, your social media, because there's a lot of large corporations that listen to the show. And I bet many of them haven't thought about this. Maybe lots of them haven't thought about this, but it's brilliant. So let's make sure the audience knows how to get hold of you.
So I love that. Thank you so much for giving me that opportunity. So as a reminder, I'm James Sinclair. I'm the principal of Enterprise Alumni. You can find me on all of the internets or enterprisealumni.com, but feel free to reach out to me about a conversation. I don't need a customer to be all in. I'm okay with a customer who says, this piques my interest. I'm okay with someone who says, I'm a medium-sized business and I can't afford your software, but I like the idea. Is there something I can be doing? I'm a really big into learning, conversation, new connections. I love that. I love hearing what you're doing. And I love speaking to people like you who have an angle that's separate to what I am in day to day. And I think that's part of what the new order that we're seeing is be human and just listen. Just start there.
We're stronger together. So also, just out of curiosity, who are some of the customers you're working with?
So we are amazingly fortunate to have some very large customers all the way from Nestle, HSBC, Google, those type of customers. So we do have some very large, and we also go downstream into some of the smaller banks, some of the banks you mentioned are some of our customers. I'm conscious of not just dropping names without their permission, but we've been very fortunate because we do exactly the same as you talked about, which is we make sure we're all in on our customers and we listen and we understand. And, that one lady 3.5 years ago, reached out and said, I'm having a shitty time using your website. She knows exactly how much of a debt of gratitude because she's still part of us. She's still part of our family. Yeah. She can't get rid of us.
She's part of your tribe. And so what a beautiful story. And I'm so glad you reached out because it just had not come into my consciousness. So now I know you're there, and I think there's a lot of ways that we can work together. And I was watching. I will say this, that you sent me a link to a Bloomberg interview, and it was so powerful. So let's make sure that you send I'll make sure that we'll put that link in on the website. But I'm very impressed with your work. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, James.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you did great. Bye, everyone.